Jane walked along the country road with a large bag on her shoulder, cursing to herself, her feet sinking into the mud all the time. It was difficult to call it a road, so the shoes that the girl was wearing looked like a lump of dirt, but not like the fashionable shoes she bought the day before. She swore again and took out a piece of paper with an address from her pocket, not understanding if she was going in the right direction. Suddenly, a car stopped in front of her. The young man behind the wheel asked her, "Girl, can I give you a ride?" Jane, tired by this point completely, quipped, "I can handle it myself." But in a second, she regretted it. The car pulled away, dousing the already soiled Jane with mud. When she got to a more or less clear area, she sat down on a log lying there and burst into tears. "God, why was I so unlucky to get into this wilderness? Was there really no other place to practice in this city?" Jane was asking herself these questions and spraying mascara all over her face, and she didn't notice how the same car that had doused her with mud stopped next to her again. This time, the guy got out of the car and approached the crying girl. He began to make excuses. "Forgive me, I got angry. After all, you answered me so boldly, and I wanted to do what was best." Jane screamed, "Go with your apologies. You are crazy." The stranger tried to talk to her. "I'm ready to fix everything. Tell me, where are you going?" She handed him a piece of paper with the address, realizing that it was useless for her to argue, and she needed to get to her place of residence. He smiled as he studied the paper carefully. The guy commanded, "Great, get in the car." Jane asked, wiping her tears, "But what about the dirt? I'll mess up your car." The stranger had already put her bag in the car and opened the door for her. When Jane got into the car, she realized how cold she was. She was dressed inappropriately for the weather. She had been in the village for a very long time, in early childhood when she visited her grandmother with her parents. But a lot of time has passed since then, and she completely forgot that she can expect in the village, because she was used to the delights of city life. The driver didn't make a sound the whole way to their destination, although Jane felt he was looking at her through the mirror. When they arrived, the guy helped her carry the bag to the door. The guy smiled, handing her a bag. "We have arrived. By the way, my name is Robert. I live next door. If you need help, please get in touch." The girl said, "Thanks, Robert, but I think I can handle it myself." Then she hurried into the house, but as soon as she closed the door, there was a knock on it. Robert said, "I'm sorry, I meant to say that Mother had heated the bathhouse. You can come and watch with us." The girl replied, "Thank you. You helped me a lot, and now I need to rest." Then she slammed the door in front of the guy's face. She turned on the light, looked around her temporary home, and sighed heavily. The house consisted of a kitchen and a small room. There was a thick layer of dust all around. It looked like it hadn't been cleaned in a long time. The girl thought, "Tomorrow I will put things in order here, but for now I need to wash and sleep." And she went to look for the bathroom, yawning sweetly. But she didn't find anything, except for a structure that vaguely looked like a shower, which was fenced on 4 sides with curtains. Jane turned on the faucet and realized there was no water. At that moment, the phone rang. She heard the voice of her groom Billy. "How did you get settled there?" Jane sighed. "Terrible. There are no roads at all. I barely got to the place, and now it turned out that there was no water in the house. I don't even know what to do." She expected advice from Billy, but he only sympathized and hung up, saying goodnight. Jane made the bed with the linen she had brought with her, after which she realized that she couldn't go to bed in this form. She needed to take a bath. She thought for a while and put the towel and everything she needed in a bag and went to the neighboring house. A pleasant middle-aged woman opened the door. Jane was in a similar situation for the first time and therefore felt awkward. "Hello, I'm temporarily your neighbor and I have no water. Robert said I can wash in your bathhouse. I understand that this is not very convenient." The woman smiled. "Sure, come on in. So, you're our new paramedic?" Jane nodded. "This is good. Bath is here. And then I'll wait for you for dinner." The bathhouse was quite modern with a good repair, so it was a pleasure to bathe in it. The girl left the bathhouse, put on a terry robe, after which she entered the neighbor's house. There was a hot supper on the table. Jane didn't have the strength to refuse. She was very hungry. She planned to go to the store only tomorrow. The woman's name was Mrs. Harris. She turned out to be a pleasant conversationalist. Jane thanked the landlady and headed home, bumping into Robert at the door. He examined the girl from head to toe, smiling enigmatically, and wished her good night. Early in the morning, the girl began to clean up. Only cold water came out of the tap in the kitchen, but Jane was happy about it anyway. In the middle of cleaning, there was a knock on the door. Jane opened the door and saw Robert holding a suitcase full of tools. He said, "I've come to fix the faucet." Jane tried to retort timidly, "You didn't have to worry." But Robert had already taken off his shoes and walked to the site of the tap failure. The girl continued her work, deciding not to distract Robert, who came to her aid. An hour later, water came out of the tap, which Jane was extremely happy about. She asked the guy stacking the tools, "Why are you helping me?" Robert replied, "Why can't I help you if it's not difficult for me to do, and I like you?" And he went out, leaving Jane to ponder the meaning of his words. After going to the store and buying everything she needed, Jane went to inspect her place of work. Her groom Billy didn't call her again, which made her very angry. The girl thought, "He might ask how I manage here alone." But Robert caught her eye several times, each trying to offer his help. The girl was surprised that guy at such a young age knew how to do almost everything that was required in the household, unlike Billy. He hardly ever held a hammer or screwdriver in his hands. When the intern Jane got to work, she was immediately liked by the villagers. The old people praised the young female paramedic. Some grateful patients even tried to feed the thin girl with natural products. On the girl's table, there was always fresh milk, cottage cheese, sour cream, and chicken eggs. Jane, in turn, never refused anyone a request to measure the pressure before going to bed. Robert visited her almost every evening. Now, they were drinking tea together and discussing the latest news. Gradually, Jane began to notice that she liked him too. The guy had an excellent sense of humor and golden hands. In addition, he was very charming. She was afraid of her feelings because in the city, Billy was waiting for her, but she couldn't help herself. One evening, Robert seemed to her somehow upset. Jane asked, "What's wrong with you? You don't look like yourself today." Robert came so close that Jane caught her breath. "I thought about us. After all, you'll be here for another 2 months, and then you're going back to the city?" She replied in a hoarse voice, "Yes, after practice, I will look for a permanent job." Robert ran his hand down her cheek and asked her softly, "What about me? What should I do now?" He looked her straight in the eyes. Jane was ready to burst into tears from suddenly surging feelings, but the guy quickly said goodbye and left. He promised to come back the next day. Jane didn't sleep all night. Robert was in her head, and in the morning she went to work, struggling with a headache from lack of sleep. The first patient was a young girl who entered the office and latched closed the door behind her. Jane was indignant. "What are you doing? I never close when I see patients." The girl said, clenching her fist in anger, "You will tell this to the old woman. Now listen to me, city girl. Robert is my boyfriend, you understand? And until you came from your city, everything was fine with us. We were going to get married, and now he's avoiding me because of you. But you won't succeed because I'm expecting Robert's baby. Go to your city and forget about him. Get out of my way." Jane asked her again, "Are you expecting a baby? Don't worry, there's nothing between us. And I didn't even know you existed. He won't come to me again, trust me." And when the door slammed behind the guest, she burst into tears. In the evening, there was a knock on her door as usual. Jane opened the door. It was Robert's. She said dryly, "Don't come to me again. That will be better for everyone. We don't need to see each other again." The guy didn't understand anything. "Why? And what happened? Did I offend you?" "I beg you not to come to me again. There can be nothing between us." Jane tried to close the door quickly, but Robert asked her, sticking his foot in the doorway, "You don't want to date a hillbilly?" "Think as you wish. I told you everything." This time, Jane managed to slam the door shut. Tears rolled from her eyes. She picked up the phone and decided to write to Billy so that he would urgently come. Robert never visited her again. Jane often met him on the street and each time tried to take her eyes off him, feeling as if he was burning her with his gaze. A few days later, Billy arrived, but Jane didn't feel the joy of meeting him, realizing that partying with him was inevitable. Jane decided to forget Robert with his help. The next weekend, she and Billy went shopping, wanting to have a picnic in the nearby woods. It was Billy's idea. The young man was so struck by village life that he put forward idea after idea. Jane didn't really want to go with him, but she had to agree. When Jane was waiting for Billy on the porch of the house, she suddenly felt her hand being grabbed. It was Robert. He asked her, "After all, you don't love him. Why do you need him?" It was only now that Jane noticed how much he had lost weight these days, and his eyes were red as if he hadn't slept at all. Jane said as she pulled away from his grip, "I love him, and it doesn't concern you. You understand me?" At that moment, Billy came out of the house and asked her, "What happened?" "Beloved, get acquainted. This is our neighbor Robert. I'm sorry, but we have to go." She took Billy's arm and started towards the woods. She suggested to Billy, "I don't like this forest idea. Maybe we'll have a picnic in the yard. There's a lot of space there." Billy enthusiastically answered, looking around. "Look what places are here, just like in a fairy tale. When else will we have this opportunity?" She remarked, "I heard that the locals for some reason are afraid to go into the forest." Billy said, "Bullshit! Get it out of your head. You are with me and you have nothing to fear." They chose the right clearing for a picnic and dispersed in search of firewood. Suddenly, Jane stumbled and realized that something was pulling her leg underground. She screamed with all her might and tried to get out, but the same thing happened to the other leg. She realized that she was in a quagmire. When Billy came, Jane had a real tantrum. She screamed, "Get me out of here! Help me!" But the guy was confused, trying to stay away from that place. The girl begged him, "What are you standing for? Help me!" "But then I'll get stuck there myself. I'll call someone to help you." And he ran away. Jane understood, left alone in the terrible forest, that she was unlikely to get help, and she was paralyzed by animal fear, and her voice was hoarse from screaming. She tried to scream again, "Someone, help me!" Suddenly, Jane felt her arms grabbed, trying to pull her out of the quagmire, and she heard a familiar voice. Robert's voice calmed Jane a little. "Help me, just a little more, and we will definitely manage. Just don't be afraid. I won't let you down." She relaxed completely, trusting him. After several attempts, Robert managed to pull her out, and they fell head over heels into the ground. She asked him, catching her breath, "How did you get here?" "I saw that you were heading towards the forest. That's why I followed you." "How did you decide to come here? I told you that the locals never go to this forest." Jane said, "I don't know. Billy insisted on it. You risked your life to save me." Robert said softly, holding Jane close, "Nonsense. You scared me so much. I was afraid of not being able to help you. I would never forgive myself if anything happened to you." Jane asked him, "What about your girlfriend? After all, she is expecting a child from you." Robert shrugged. "What girlfriend? I don't understand anything." "A blonde girl came to me. She asked me to leave you because you have a wedding and she is expecting a child from you." Robert laughed and then whispered, "Now, I understand why you ignored me all this time. This is Jessica. She has been running after me since childhood, but I couldn't think that she was capable of such a thing. Look, I don't have any girlfriend and no child. I don't need anyone but you. I love only you." Jane replied, "I love you too." Billy never came. Also, Jane didn't find his things when she got home. When Jane finished her practice, she got a full-time job as a paramedic in the village where she met her love.